أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Inshallah, after a few weeks off, we're going to get back into the swing of things. We're going to start with new material, lesson 16, which deals with the verbs and the imperfect tense of verbs that have a weak letter as the final letter. And just for review, what are the weak letters, or in Arabic, ahruf al-illa. Ahruf is the plural of harf, harf meaning letter. So harf al-illa is one weak letter, ahruf is the plural. What are the weak letters? Waw, ya, and you can say alif. Not hamza. Hamza is not considered to be a weak letter. So any verb that has a hamza functions like any other verb. Right? Examples will be, for example, qara'a or sa'ala or asala. So if a verb has an alif in the first, second, or third letter, then it's not a weak letter, a hamza. If it's a waw or a ya or an alif will also be converted from a waw or a ya, then it's a weak letter. And that weak letter, of course, can be in the first letter out of the three root letters of a verb. It can be the second letter, or it can be the third letter. So today we're going to look at verbs that have the weak letter in the third place. And that is known as al-fi'l al-naqis. Al-naqis. Naqis means deficient. And it's deficient because in certain cases that weak letter will be dropped. It's not going to be visible. And we'll see a few examples of that today. There's other examples of when that letter is dropped that will come later on when we talk about the grammar or the different cases that the verb can enter into. But we'll see some examples of that today. So it's called naqis because in certain cases that last letter will drop off. It won't be visible. You'll have to guess what it is. So there's different possibilities. We can have the last letter be an alif. That takes place when the letter before the last letter has a fathah. An example of that is the verb laqiya, and the imperfect of that is yalqa. So in this case, what is the last letter? It's an alif. It's written like a ya, but it's considered to be an alif because it's pronounced like an alif. That wasn't a trick question. When I said the last letter can be an alif, and I give you the example yalqa, it means that the last letter is an alif. It's written like a ya, but it's pronounced like an alif, and it's considered to be an alif because the qaf has a fathah. Another example will be a verb like hada yahdi. This verb yahdi, what is the last letter here? It's a ya. And then the third possibility is that the last letter will be as in yad'u, What is the last letter here? A waw. Yad'u. All of them will be conjugated similarly, but there will be some minor differences, and so there is an example for a chart for each of those examples. We'll go over the chart. And all of them are based on our standard chart for a verb like fa'ala yaf'alu or yaktubu or yadribu, which has the 3 letters all being regular consonants. No weak letters, no doubled letters, no hamza even. That is the standard chart. So always compare it back to that. Keep that in the back of your mind. Yaktubu, yaktubani, yaktubuna, taktubu, taktubani, yaktubna, and so on. If you have that in the back of your mind and you review it once before you look at these charts, then you'll see how the modifications are made and what the difference is. So let's look at the first example that we have, which is the verb yalqa. One basic thing to keep in mind is that the last letter, because it's a weak letter, it will not have a haraka on it. So you would expect yaktubu, yaf'alu, yadribu, yaftahu. The last letter has a dhamma. But in this case, there will be no dhamma on the last letter, because an alif cannot have a dhamma or any other haraka. And later on, in the case of a waw or a ya, it also will not have a haraka. So we don't say yalqa'u or yalqa'yu. We say yalqa with no haraka on the last letter. And then yalqayani. That's very much like yaftahani. Almost no difference. Yalqawna. Now this is one example. If you want, you can circle it, where that ya is disappeared. Right? The waw is added for the plural. The noon is added as part of the form in the plural for that form of the verb. But that original ya has disappeared. It's not yalquna, it's yalqawna. Then for the feminine, talqa, talqayani, and yalqayna. In this case, the ya is the original ya of the verb. Just like we have yaftahna, we have yalqayna. For second person, the anta form, you, talqa, talqayani, and talqawna. Here again, we have the ya being dropped, which is the third root letter, and the letter before the waw has a fatha. So if you want, you can circle this one as well. It's not as you would expect it to be. Then we have the feminine second person, the anti. Here we have talqayna. What would you expect? If it had been, for example, the verb yaftahu, right? The verb yaftahu. What is the anti-form of yaftahu? Taftahina. Excellent. And if you keep that in mind, you can see what the change is. We have taftahina. So we expect talqayina. Right? Taftahina, talqayina. The ta is because it's the imperfect. First letter fa, here we have a first letter lam. Second letter ta, here we have a second letter qaf. Third letter ha, here we have a third letter ya. And then we add a ya noon, We put the same vowels, taftahina, talqayina. But as you say that, talqayina, you can see that it's difficult to say. And the way the Arab grammarians analyzed it, they say that we have a fatha here and then a weak letter. So what we'll do is we'll convert this weak letter to an alif. It fits the fatha. And then we have a alif which has a sukoon and a ya which is also sukoon. So we have to drop one of them. We'll drop the alif and then the qaf is followed by a ya. So talqayna. Now, is it important for you to rethink that process every time? No. You can just memorize that the verb, instead of being talqayina, will be talqayna. But if you have that in the back of your mind, that this is the same form as tadribina, taktubina, taftahina, taf'alina, then it'll become easier for you to see that there's just a simple change. Instead of saying talqayina, we're saying talqayna. Shortened, easier to say. And if you don't remember the details, you just remember that this is easier to say. That's enough for you to be able to practically use it correctly. So if you want, you can circle this form as well. And then we have the dual talqayani. That's as you would expect it to be. And then talqayna, once again, as you would expect. Alqa, nalqa. So the notes we have here are that the second person feminine singular and the second person feminine plural are the same form. Both of them are talqayna. Right? But the first one is anti talqayna and the second one is antunna talqayna. The verb form is the same. So I'll say anti talqayna. Or I'll say antunna talqayna. The same verb form. But in this case, it's shortened from talqayina. In this case, the plural, it's not shortened from anything. Because what is the antunna form of taktubu, for example? It's taktubna. تكتبنا تضربنا تفتحنا تفعلنا تلقينا. It's the exact same form. See? تفتحنا تلقينا. So that's not shortened, that's how you would expect it to be according to the normal verb form, the standard rules. The antunna is the way it would normally be. The anti form has been shortened. They end up looking the same, and only the context will tell you whether it's the singular or the plural feminine verb. The second and third person masculine plural will lose the last letter of the verb. Yalqawna, talqawna. The ya will be dropped. Right, the ya or the alif. And if you want to make a note, you can also put in a note that none of the verb forms will have that final dhamma that normally you will see in the huwa form or in the hiya form or the anta or the ana or the nahnu form. Those that end in a dhamma, they don't end in that dhamma anymore. And which are the three forms that we dropped, that we circled, because the ya was dropped? Yalqawna, which is the third person masculine plural, that's the hum form. talqawna, which is the second person masculine plural, the antum form, and the anti form, the second person feminine singular. In those cases, the ya has dropped. That's one reason why we call it naqis. Now, the next verb that we have is one that ends in a ya. And when a verb ends in a ya, there will be a slight difference in some of the conjugations. The same basic rule applies from the first form, that the dhamma will be dropped. We don't say yahdiyu, like yadribu. Instead we say yahdi, so that there's no dhamma. Aside from that, yahdi, yahdiyane is as you would expect. And then we have yahduna, once again that ya drops. So you can circle that if you'd like. The third letter, the weak letter, drops. So yahduna. And then tahdi, hiya tahdi, huma tahdiyane, hunna yahdina. All of those are regular. And then the anta form, tahdi, tahdiyane, tahduna. That again is with the ya dropped. And then tahdina, you can circle this one as well. The ya is dropped. Right? Tahdina, you'd expect it to be tadribina, tahdiyina. But tahdiyina is difficult to say, so we say tahdina. Tahdiyane, and then tahdina, ahdi, nahdi. Hada yahdi means to guide. To guide. And laqiya yalqa means to meet. And normally yalqa means to happen to meet. So it's to come across, to encounter. Whereas a deliberate meeting is a different verb, mulaqat. Mulaqat is the infinitive. But laqiya yalqa liqa means to encounter. And then the next example that we have is from a verb that ends in waw. Once again, the dhamma is dropped, so instead of saying yad'u, we say yad'u. Unlike yaktubu, we say yad'u. The waw is dropped. Yad'uwane, yad'una. Here we should have had two waws, but we drop one. So instead of saying yaktubuna, yad'uuna, we have one waw. So you can circle that one. Then for the feminine, tad'u, tad'uwane, yad'una. Notice here again, you have yad'una, but you're not going to circle this one. Because in this case, that is according to the rule. Yaktubna, yad'una. This waw is that original waw that belongs to the root letters. In the masculine plural, you should have had two waws, one was dropped. In the feminine plural, that waw is the original waw. Nothing is dropped. Then with the anta form, tad'u, tad'uwane, tad'una, you can circle that again, because it's one waw being dropped. Tad'uuna, in the masculine plural, becomes tad'una. And then tad'ina, tad'uwane, tad'una. You can circle the feminine singular, tad'ina, just to see if you guys are still awake. what is the original form? So we want to say the anti-form of yaktubu. Taktubina. Thank you. Taktubina. Right? Anti taktubina, tadribina, taftahina. So taktubina. So we have tad'uwina. That Dhamma is on the ayn. Tad'uwina. So what's done is the kasra is difficult to pronounce on a waw, tad'uwina. So the kasra is brought forward to the ayn. We bring the kasra to the ayn. And then the waw becomes sakin. The ya was sakin from before. So we drop the waw. And we have tad'ina. So you can circle that. Then tad'uwani, tad'una. Ad'u, nad'u. Now in this case, which forms are the same? The masculine plural and the feminine plural are the same in both the third person and in the second person. So yad'una could be the masculine or the feminine plural. Hum yad'una, hunna yad'una. And tad'una could be masculine or feminine. It could be antum tad'una or antunna tad'una. Any questions? You just have to practice a little bit and it'll become clear. If there's any consolation, many of these forms will very rarely be used because it's not as common as the normal forms, and the dual and plural forms are not very frequently used. Now, before we go over some of the examples in the Quran, I just want to remind you that the verb ra'a, which means to see, the present tense you'd expect it to be yar'a. Ra'a, yar'a. Like laqiya, yalqa. Yalqa, yar'a. Yas'a, yar'a. Correct? But that hamza is dropped. And so we actually end up saying yara. But everything else is just according to the same pattern that we learned for yalqa. Just imagine that the middle letter were dropped. So instead of saying yalqa, we say yala. And the conjugation, the endings are the same. So because it's a very common verb, why don't we go through all 14 patterns? If you'd like, you can write it down for your own notes as well. So the verb is ra'a, yara, to see. And I'm going to need your help. We'll start with the masculine singular, the imperfect. Yara, yarayane, yarawna. ترى تريان يرين. Thank you. And how will you know that? You can look at the chart for yalqa. Do we have yalqawna here or yalqayna here? We have yalqayna, right? If you look at the chart, yalqayna, so yarayna. The endings are the same. Then we come to the anta form. Tara, tarayane. Thank you. Tarawna. And now we have the feminine anti. Tarayna, thank you. Tarayane. Tarayna. Ara. Nara. Excellent. Did you bring it prepared for class, or did you following the chart? And you can follow the chart. If you do a few examples like that, then it will start to become even easier. So for some of you who may not have had the courage to be able to do that right now, if you practice a little bit, then it will start to flow. The patterns will become familiar to your tongue. So yalqa, yara will be easy to compare to one another. So keep that chart in mind, and we can look at the Quranic verses. I'm not going to translate the entire verse, but just go over the examples that we have. Specifically, وَاللَّهُ يَدْعُو إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ وَالْمَغْفِرَةِ بِإِذْنِهِ. وَاللَّهُ يَدْعُو. يَدْعُو, he calls. It's the singular. Huwa form. وَهُمْ يَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابِ. يَتْلُونَ is the third person masculine plural. Hum yatluna. So it's like yad'una. Yatlu, yatluwane, yatluna. The next one, you might think it's a typographical error. It's a long verb, and doesn't seem like it's Arabic, right? Especially if it doesn't have the vowel signs on it. Let me write it. Fa, sa, yak, fi, ka, hum. Now, how many words is this? It's several. Let me change the color. So one word is the fa. Then we have sa, which means soon. Then we have yakfi. Yakfi, it's enough, it's sufficient. From kifaya, enough. The word kafi is from the same root. That's enough or sufficient. Yakfi, to be sufficient. Ka is the direct object. And then hum is what's known in Arabic as the second direct object. So the fa, then, or so, soon, meaning it's for the future. Yakfi, to be sufficient. for you. Hum, with regard to them. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in one. But the verb itself is yakfi. And yakfi is like yahdi. The huwa form. يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء. يهدي هو form of the verb. وجاءوا أباهم عشاء يبكون. يبكون is the what form? First, second, third person. Third person. Masculine or feminine? Masculine. And singular, plural, dual. Plural. So it's the hum form. And the context tells you that even before you get to the verb, ja'u, plural. Abahum, hum is a plural pronoun. عشاء يبكون. ألم ترى كيف فعل ربك بعاد. That word ألم ترى, you'll see it frequently in the Quran. لم ترى. It's derived from the verb tara. Because of the lam, the ya gets dropped. Now that we've discovered the beauty of color, that ya gets dropped. So we say lam without the ya, tara. And we'll learn about the details of that later. But it's the same verb, ra'a yara. So alam tara. كيف فعل ربك بعاد. ليجزي الذين آمنوا. يجزي. That should be yajzi, but there is a fatha because of the lam that comes before it. It becomes yajziya. And we'll learn about that in more detail later on. وَهُمْ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ. يَنْهَوْنَ is like يَلْقَوْنَ. It's the hum form. أَوَلَا يَرَوْنَ. Also like يَلْقَوْنَ. Hum. وَسَيَصْلَوْنَ سَعِيرًا. يَصْلَوْنَ is the home form. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. يَبْقَى masculine, singular. Third person. وَلَا يَحْزَنَّ وَيَرْضَيْنَ. يَحْزَنَّ is also the feminine plural. Right? It's like saying يَفْتَحْنَ. يَفْتَحْنَ. We say يَحْزَنَّ. But because there's two noons, we write them as one. It's the same يَفْتَحْنَ, يَحْزَنَّ. But we write them as one. And it's from the word huzn, which means to be sad. La yahzanna, they will not be sad. Feminine plural. Wa yardayna, they will be pleased. Yardayna is like yalqayna or yarayna. And تحيتهم يوم يلقونه سلام. يلقون is like what we discussed. It's the same verb. يلقون. It's the home form of the verb. Right, now we're going to look at a few plurals. The plurals that we're going to look at first are for the fa'il pattern. One note, the fa'il pattern can be used both with the sense of an adjective and with the sense of a noun. Now in Arabic, adjectives are nouns. But an adjective meaning is a word that is used to describe another word. And a noun meaning is the same form, but it's not used in a descriptive sense or an adjectival sense. It's used as a name for something. So the word Nabi, for example, literally is an adjective. The root word nabwa, I think, means to be elevated or to be high. And so Nabi could be an adjective meaning an elevated person. But it's not used in that sense. We don't say Nabi describing something. We say it as in the sense of a noun, right? A word that can be described. It's the name of a certain rank or position given by Allah. So we will not consider it to be an adjective. In some cases in Arabic you will see that the plural will vary depending on whether the meaning is the meaning of an adjective or not. So some examples that we have. If the word fa'il is a noun, it will often be given the plural of fu'ala, and fu'ala is غير منصرف. So when we say ulama, for example, we will never say ulama'un, but instead we will say ulama'u.
All count patterns are...
No, this one is غير منصرف, and the reason is that it ends in an alif hamza. So it's similar to a feminine. That the alif hamza at the end is not feminine here, but it's similar to a feminine ending. Right? Now keep in mind that adjectives are also considered nouns in Arabic. So it's not always going to be a solid distinction. And actually in this pattern we do have words that are used primarily as adjectives. So Kareem, for example, will generally be used as an adjective. Sharik, shuraka'u, faqir, fuqara'u, alim, ulama'u, kareem, kurama'u. The plural of Kareem? The plural of Kareem is kurama. It's actually typed as kurama, I believe, because of the table. The dhamma is not visible, so you want to correct that. Yeah, it's not karama, it's kurama. Yeah. And several places in the notes you'll have to make that note. The dhammas, especially when there is a tall letter like a hamza or a kaf, it doesn't show up fully. Now the next group that we have is adjectives that have the same pattern, and they are often given the plural fi'al, and that's munsarif. So kibarun, plural of kabir, kiram, plural of karim, sigar, plural of sagir, idam, plural of azim. And then there's two special cases. One is if the last letter is a weak letter. In that case, the pattern is often going to be af'ila. Af'ila. And the last letter, the lam, is a ya. So you can think of it as af'iya. Like nabi, anbiya, qawi, aqwiya, ghani, aghniya, shaqi, ashqiya. And that will be غير munsarif, so there will be no tanween and no kasra. And then if there is a doubled letter, like the word shadid or habib, then the pattern will be the same af'ila, but the ayn and the lam are the same letter, so they will be combined. Idgham, and you can think of it as afilla, ashidda, ahibba, because of the idgham. So ashdida becomes ashidda, ahbiba becomes ahibba. Aziz, plural, a'izza. Okay. Now we have one other pattern that we'll look at. That is the pattern fa'il. Fa'il is generally used for an adjective, but it can also take on the meaning of a non-adjectival noun. So katib can mean, as an adjective, a writer. But it can also have the sense of a noun, a person who is a writer. Now it's functioning as the name of a profession, or somebody who does something. It's not really a descriptor. Even though it's derived from that descriptive meaning. But when I say writer, it's like saying policeman. It's not an adjective describing the person, it's a noun naming a certain person. The sense can change. Two common patterns that are used in these cases are fu'al and fa'ala. Sometimes both are used, sometimes one of them is used more than the other. So we can say katib, kuttab, or kataba, hakim, hukam, or hakama, ظالم ظلام or ظلم, kafir kuffar or kafara, warith wurrath or waratha, amil ummal or amala. Question? Kataba? Yes.
When do you use?
Sometimes one is used more than the other. It's very common to say amala, for example. Amala meaning a group of people who are working, who are amil. Kafara is used, the group of people who are unbelievers or ungrateful. Waratha, the inheritors or heirs. In other cases, though, the fu'al pattern is more common. So kuttab is more common than kataba. Hukam is more common than hakama. And then there are certain verbs, certain active participles that have a weak letter, right? Like we had with da'i, which becomes shortened to da'in, or qadi becoming qadin. The plural that's commonly used with these is fu'a. So ramin, the plural is rumat. Da'in, the plural is du'at. Qadin, plural is qudat. Hadin, plural is hudat.
Notice most of all these have beta.
Yes, that's whenever there's a weak letter, then that ta will be added to the plural.
So is it fair to say that all be feminine?
No, this is so rumat or du'at is the plural of ram or da or da'i, qadi. Qadi is masculine, but the plural is qudat. The feminine would have been qadiyatun, and the plural of qadiyatun would be qadiyat. So qadiyatun, qadiyat. But qadin is qudat. And the same thing can also be used if it has alif lam. The plural will not change. So qadin, the ya is dropped without alif lam. Plural qudat. If it's with alif lam, then the ya comes back, right? Al-qadi or al-qudat. The plural is, of course, the same. And this is ta marbuta because it's not the feminine plural. So we won't write qudat. It's not the alif ta plural. It's a ta marbuta. It's the plural of a masculine noun. Qadi is masculine. The plural is qudat.
How would you say like the great judges will say Qudatul Kabar?
Yes. The great judges will be Al-Qudat, Al-Kibar, or Al-Idham. And if it had been feminine, you would have said, for example, Al-Qadiyat. And you could have said, for example, العظيمات. Okay, that concludes lesson 16. Now, those of you who worked on the practice exam that we had, the take-home test, if you'd like, we can go over that. And if you haven't worked on it yet, then it's up to you if you'd like to stay in the class or if you'd like to try to work on it on your own before you listen to the recording of today's lecture.
I worked on it, and so I tried to do it only my memory, and some of them I got, but then I found it extremely difficult. So the good thing though is I understood where I had to look into my notes. I know exactly what the problem was, or what issue was, but my database was empty.
All right. Well, why don't we start with the end, because I think we can go through some of those quickly. Question number 10 was translate the following sentences into English. And all of these are very simple sentences, actually. Kalamullahi huwa ahsanul kalam. And that's ahsanul kalami. Mudaf mudaf ilayh. Kalamullahi is one mudaf mudaf ilayh, and ahsanul kalami is another mudaf mudaf ilayh. The speech of God is the best speech. That huwa, it's kind of like saying the speech of God, He is the best speech, or it is the best speech. It's like قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Huwa, He, God is one. Now in this case the usage is between the mubtada and the khabar. And that will explain it and when it's used sometime in the future. رَأَى النَّبِيُّ آيَةَ اللَّهِ الْكُبْرَى. Is there a question on the first one?
Instead of speech, we were to use word.
Kalam means speech. It's not just one word. Kalima is word.
So you could say the word.
The words of God would be fine. But kalam is, words means a group of words. Kalam is a group that actually that has a meaning. So kalam is different from kalimat. Kalimat is alfab, words strung together. But kalam is words strung together with a meaning. So that's fine, because sometimes the expression is used in one way in one language, another way in another language. But the meaning here is speech that has a meaning. Number 2, رَأَى النَّبِيُّ آيَةَ اللَّهِ الْكُبْرَى. Kubra here is an adjective describing ayah, greatest sign of God, because it's kubra, right? Biggest. So the Prophet saw the biggest sign of God. دعا زيد لأبيه وأمه بعد صلاة الفجر. Zaid, here it means prayed. Because when you say da'a li abihi, prayed for. Da'a can mean both to call or to pray. When it means call though, it's not going to be used with. You won't say li. The preposition li will not be used. Instead you will say da'a Zaydun, for example, Muhammadan. Zayd called Muhammad. When it's to pray for though, you won't say da'a Zaydun Muhammadan. You'll say da'a Zaydun li Muhammadin. Because in a prayer you're not calling Muhammad. You're calling God for Muhammad. So it's da'a Zaydun Allah li Muhammadin. Zayd called God for Muhammad, or Zayd prayed for Muhammad. So da'a Zaydun li abihi wa ummihi. Zayd called God or prayed for his father and mother ba'da salat al-fajr, after the morning prayer. or the prayer of the morning, the prayer of dawn. إن الجنة خير للمؤمنين من الدنيا وما فيها. Indeed, paradise is better for the believers than the world and what is in it. Ma here means that what, or the thing that is in it. Khair here does not just mean good, it means better. When khair is used with min, it means to be better than something. لا يأكل المؤمن لحم الخنزير. Does not eat. So the believer does not eat the meat of the pig. And here it's not of the pig, but of the category of pig. So lahm al-khinzir is not the meat of one pig, but the meat of the species of pig. Al-khinzir in Arabic is the genus or the species of pig. Okay, why don't we go back to number 9. Translate into Arabic. And I'm going to write these down on the whiteboard, and I'll do it quickly. Zaid is bigger than Ahmad. Zaid akbaru min Ahmada. Ahmada because it's غير منصرف, so the jar will be with fatha. If you had Ahmadin, that's wrong, because Ahmad cannot take kasra or tanween. Zaydun. Akbaru also because that's غير منصرف. Fatima is smaller than Zainab. Fatimatu غير منصرف. أصغر من زينب. Fatima is غير منصرف. Zainab is also غير منصرف. So neither of them will take tanween or kasra. Where is the biggest school? أين المدرسة الكبرى? Question? Is this school bigger than that school? هل هذه المدرسة أكبر من تلك المدرسة T, because of the min تلك المدرسة T.
Does the min make it majrur or
the min makes the tilka majrur, and the tilka is the same thing as madrasa. In Arabic, madrasa is considered to be an adjective describing tilka, but you can think of it as one unit. In the sentence that school, it's one unit. So whatever tilka is, madrasa will be the same. You can say هل هذه المدرسة أكبر من تلك. That's fine. Is this school bigger than that? But if you bring what tilka is referring to, then it will be majroor just like tilka is. It's considered to be a sifa. Zayd is the strongest of the people. Zaydun. أقوى الناس. That will be majroor because it's مضاف مضاف إليه. أقوى الناس. Prayer is better than sleep. الصلاة خير من النوم. That's not part of the azan. Jealousy is worse than greed. الحسد شر من الطمع. And number 8, again I'll write them. In the imperfect tense, kataba in the ana form will be aktubu. Jalasa in the anti form will be tajli sina. Qara'a in the hum form will be yaqra'una, written like that. Dhahaba in the question? The huma form? Yaqra'ane. Yeah, yaqra'ane. This would be the huma form. That's in parentheses. Dhahaba in the nahnu form would be nadhabu. Sa'ala in the huma form can be yes alane if it's masculine, or tas alane if it's feminine, right? Because huma can be either masculine or feminine. Correct? Dalla in the antum form will be tadulluna, and farra in the antunna form will be tafrirna. For number 7, I won't write them, but I'll just let you know what the forms are. Kataba, the ismul fa'il, will be katibun, katibani or katibaini, katibuna or katibina. Then for the feminine, katibatun, katibatani, katibatun. Qatala, the ismul maf'ul, will be maqtulun, maqtulani, maqtulaini, maqtuluna, maqtulina. Feminine, maqtulatun, maqtulatani, maqtulataini. Plural, maqtulat. Qama, ismul fa'il, qa'imun, قائمان قائمين قائمون قائمين. feminine قائمة قائمتان قائمتين قائمات. And then هذا اسم المفعول مهدي مهديان مهديين مهديون مهديين. feminine مهدية مهديتان مهديتين مهديات. Just make a star by the hada form because I gave you the easy form, the ismul maf'ul. The ismul fa'il is the one that has the complication, either dropping the ya or not dropping the ya with alif lam. Just review that so you know. Not just the easy one, but the one that requires more presence of mind. For number 6, we want to translate the sentences into English. And they're relatively easy. I'll give you the answers. Aina rajulan, The sheet that I printed out had a mistake. I wrote رجلين. It should be رجلان. أين الرجلان اللذان كانا في البيت. Where are the two men who were in the house? يغفر الله للذين يقرؤون القرآن. God forgives for the ones, or God forgives the ones, or those who read the Quran. هما اللتان رأتا الأسد. They, two women, are those who saw the lion. They are the ones, or they are those. Those two, it's a sentence. So, huma allatani, they are the ones who, or those two are the ones who. It can be a fragment. So it could mean those who saw the lion. In Arabic, it's only the context that will let you know if it's a sentence or if it's a fragment. Yes. Those two women saw the lion. You have to translate allatane, which means who, or the ones who. So you need to put those two women are the ones who saw the lion, for example, or those two are the ones who saw the lion. كتبت هند الأشياء التي ذكرتها. Hind wrote the things that I mentioned. الذي يدرس سيكون عالما. The one who studies will be or become an alim, a scholar, a knowledgeable person. في المكتبة كتب كثيرة لا يقرأها أحد. In the library are many books, and then لا يقرأها أحد is also an adjective. Many books which no one reads. Because kutub is a indefinite noun, and so a sentence that comes after an indefinite noun is an adjective. So kutubun la yaqra'uha ahad, la yaqra'uha ahad is an adjective. Just like kathiratun is an adjective, la yaqra'uha ahadun is also an adjective. Fil maktabati kutubun. In the library are books, and those books have two adjectives. Kathiratun, they're many, and la yaqra'uha ahadun, no one reads them. هذه أشياء يعلمها العلماء. These are things, the scholars know them. أشياء is غير منصرف. العلماء. أشياء is غير منصرف, it doesn't take tanween. There's no rhyme or reason to it, it's just something you have to memorize. أشياء. هل في المسجد رجال يقرؤون القرآن. Are there in the masjid men who read the Quran? It's not the men who write Quran, because it's not ar-rijal. It's rijalu. So if you word it like this, are there men who read the Quran in the masjid? That's okay. So are there in the masjid men who read the Quran? Or are there men who read the Quran in the masjid? But it's not the men. It's referring to any men. And I think last week you said that you went over the first 3 questions. Was that one recorded, the session, or was it unrecorded? It was not recorded. So we have 5 more questions. What I will do is I will post these, inshallah, so that you have the answers to check with. And inshallah, next week we'll go over lesson 16 homework, and we'll go over some new material. Please try to be here on time. We want to start at 7:30, and we'll have about 20 to 25 minutes or so, about 20 minutes before Maghrib. And inshallah we'll do Maghrib prayer and then come immediately back and resume our class. So it'll be a little break, but that way we'll be able to finish on time without getting too late.
Class would be in this building.
Next week, inshallah, class will be in the north building, but I will confirm that. And I'll let you know, inshallah, by email. We can conclude with salawat, inshallah.